Welcome back to the Thriving by Nature podcast. I'm Bethany Stone, and today I want to talk about something that has quietly shaped my work, my life for decades, even before I had the language for it. There's a lesson that we learn as children that somehow gets lost as adults, not because it stopped being true, but because the world around us has stopped honoring it. And that lesson comes straight out of the Montessori philosophy, which holds a deep, dear place in my heart. So today I want to explore that Montessori philosophy and what it really teaches us about how humans thrive and why adults struggle so much with motivation, burnout, self-care, and all the things that we really just forgot along the way. Because here's the truth, that most adults are not broken. We are just living in environments that do not support how we actually function. So, just to set everything in context, when people hear the word Montessori, they usually will think of like tiny chairs, wooden toys, children quietly working on the floor, having freedom to just run the roost and do all these things. These are things that I've heard, but Montessori was never just an education method. It was a philosophy of human development. Dr. Maria Montessori, she believed that humans thrive when three things are present. Autonomy, meaning that we have choice and we have agency. Prepared environments, that means that our surroundings support our success instead of giving us friction. And the third one is the intrinsic motivation, meaning that we are driven from within, not by the pressure or punishment of if we don't do it. In Montessori classrooms, we do not force children to sit still. We do not force them to perform or demand it or work in chaos. We carefully design the environment so that the child can succeed. And this is the part well, it's a huge part that adults forget. As adults, we remove all of that for ourselves. As adults, we expect ourselves to be focused in cluttered spaces. We expect motivation when we're exhausted. We expect discipline without giving ourselves the structure. And we expect to be creative without having the right surroundings. We expect ourselves to be creative under pressure. And then we judge ourselves and we wonder why we're struggling. I would see this every day in my classroom. Um, a child who could not focus was not labeled as being a lazy child. We just had to adjust the environment. A child who was having a complete meltdown wasn't shamed. We looked at what the needs were and what wasn't being met. And a child who resisted to do any material in the classroom wasn't punished. The work wasn't matching the development. And when I would watch those same children grow into adults who were just told to try harder, I remember thinking somewhere along the way, we stopped treating humans like humans. And now, as an adult, I have had moments where I caught myself doing the same thing. I try to push through exhaustion. I ignore my environment and I'll expect to have clarity without the space, and then wonder why I feel burned out. The shift came when I realized that I didn't need more willpower. I just needed a better environment. And of course, we have to always add an Aesop fable. And I teach this Aesop fable a lot with communication, but it doesn't just work towards communication. There's so many lessons within this fable. And you may have heard of me talk about it before, but it is about the wind and the sun. Because the wind tries to force this traveler to take his coat off by blowing harder and harder and harder. And the harder that the wind blows, the more that this man holds this coat and grips it around himself. and the sun simply just shines gently and steadily, and the traveler removes his coat on his own. And most of us adults live under a wind-based motivation, pressure, deadlines, self-criticism, force. Montessori philosophy is based off of the sun. It asks what conditions allow this person to naturally engage. And when we stop forcing and start supporting, behavior changes. And modern research backs this up. There are studies on motivation that consistently show how autonomy increases engagement and follows through. Environmental psychology shows that clutter and visual noise will increase cognitive load and stress. And burnout research shows that the lack of control and chronic pressure are primary contributors to exhaustion and not lack of ability. So, in other words, when people are struggling, it's rarely because they don't care. It's because their system is just overloaded. Maria Montessori, when she was creating this curriculum, she understood this long before neuroscience even caught up. So, what does all of this mean for adults? It means that your self-care is not indulgent, it is structural. It means that your environment matters. Your calendar, your home, your workspace, your boundaries. Your environment is crucial for your own development. It means that motivation is not something that you can just summon. It is something that emerges when all the conditions are right. This is why I now work with adults the way I do. I do not tell people to be more self-disciplined. I help them redesign their lives so that discipline is not constantly required, because thriving should not basically feel like you're always climbing uphill, which I think a lot of us will feel like that sometimes. And I think when we reflect upon this and we sit back and we think about what we would change in our lives, and we ask ourselves the questions, what would I simplify in my environment? Am I giving myself enough rest in between tasks? Why do I not give myself a choice instead of rigid expectations? And also, so the self-talk that happens, why am I shaming myself when honestly the bottom line is I need support? We sometimes will ask, ourselves, what's wrong with me? But realistically, we need to start asking, what does my environment need to support who I am becoming? Um, Maria Montessori taught us that humans thrive when they feel respected, supported, and trusted. And that lesson doesn't expire when we turn 18 and become an adult. This is something that goes forever. So take that time and sit back and look at your environment. What needs to change so that you can feel supported? Those three things that we really need to be sure that we have in our lives. You know, talking about them one more time, the three things are autonomy, having that choice, that agency. We need to have that. Our prepared environment, our surroundings to support us instead of giving us friction, and that intrinsic motivation, that drive from within, not by pressure or by punishment, but because we want to do it for ourselves, because we know that we will be a better person for doing so. Think about those. Think about, is that really where we're at? Is that where you're at? Because if you're not, then we need to take a step back and think about how we can build ourselves. Because when we build ourselves from within, then we're able to support the people that matter most in our lives. So, if this episode resonated with you, I would love to invite you to explore this work more deeply with me. You can visit thrivingbynature.com and you can see more about my coaching there, my self-care program, and ways that we can work together. You can also book a free strategy call on my website, and we can talk about how to redesign your life so it actually supports you. So if this episode did speak to you, please like, follow, share the podcast, and it 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 will help more people remember what they forgot. I think this is an important one because you're not broken, you're growing, and growth deserves support. And we forget that. We forget that growth doesn't look pretty all the time. It's called the messy middle for a reason. Growth isn't beautiful, it is complicated. So thank you for joining me for another episode of Thriving by Nature, and I will catch you next week.